All right, I'm showing this slide just because that's where we left off. So these are the sentences in which it shows that a verb can be one of more than one type, depending on how it's used in a sentence. Moving on to diagrams. If you have had any experience diagramming sentences, you've most likely done the traditional kind of diagram that is shown on page 42. But the tree diagram method introduced here will be our regular form. It is this method that is standard for linguistics and descriptive grammar, and it shows more clearly the relationships of the various constituents in a sentence. The way that the textbook explains the, quote, hierarchical system, unquote, of diagramming on page 37 seems rather awkward or backward to me. It seems to me that it makes more sense to break the example sentence into its two main parts. The noun phrase subject and the verb phrase predicate. And then break down the constituents from there, like so. So I separated the noun phrase subject, which is just the one word Facebook, from the verb phrase predicate, which is a popular social network. In the fully diagrammed analysis on page 39, which you can see here, it is important to grasp that in the noun phrase, a popular social network, is an article that introduces the noun phrase, popular social network. Popular is an adjective describing the noun phrase, social network, and social is an adjective describing the noun network. This is what we mean by the term hierarchy. You can see that in this noun phrase, we have a hierarchy established by one thing is embedded into another. And the word embedded is going to be something that will continue to be important in this business of diagramming. The textbook makes an important point that diagrams are just tools, and that it is the analysis of the sentence that matters, not the diagram. It is very common for people enthusiastic about grammar to get geeked out about diagrams. And I know this because, yes, I'm one of them. But at some point down the road, they will cease to be as useful. Note that the diagrams on pages 40 and 41 present one example of each of the verb types we learned in Chapter 1. This could be another very useful visual aid to keep handy, much like that one chart or page that showed the formulas for each of the verb types. Right, now let me walk you through the process of diagramming. I've chosen a very simple sentence. The mayor promised political reform. And as I did before, I'm separating the noun phrase subject, the mayor, from the verb phrase predicate, promised political reform. Now I'm going to go down another level to show the next little bit. So from there, I've broken the noun phrase subject into two parts, the article the and the noun mayor. The two of them together form a constituent, which is the noun phrase subject. In the verb phrase predicate, promised is a VT verb, and it is followed by a noun phrase direct object constituent. Now there are two words in this noun phrase direct object constituent, and in the next level I will break it down even further. Now you see that in that noun phrase direct object constituent, the word political is an adjective that describes reform, which is the noun. Now, finally, we'll move on to the last section on multi-word verbs. Perhaps it never occurred to you before that a single verb can consist of more than one word, but it's pretty common in our language, and they can be tricky to recognize without a lot of practice. And sometimes a sentence can be so ambiguous that one could make a case for it being both a multi-word verb and a verb plus a preposition. We'll come in contact with a lot of those examples. But here are some things that might help with multi-word verbs. As is mentioned on page 45, as you see here, if a multi-word verb in a sentence is transitive, and if the direct object of that sentence is a pronoun, then the verb and the particle that goes with it need to be separated by that pronoun. So, say you have a sentence like, Conan O'Brien pulled off the scam, and you are having a hard time deciding if it's a multi-word verb or a verb plus a preposition, change the direct object to a pronoun. So the scam becomes a pronoun it. And you'll see that it must be that Conan pulled it off, a multi-word verb. So this is a really good way to test for it. I mean, it only works if the verb is transitive, but that happens quite a bit. So it's a good test for that. Also, multi-word verbs tend to be used in more informal language and idiomatic expressions. For example, a lot of new verbs have been formed over the years by adding the word out to another word, like pig out or freak out. You can see how that is really kind of informal language. And then finally, because of the informal nature of these verbs, you can often test them by substituting a more formal verb for a multi-word verb. For example, in the sentence, the senator called up the president, you could substitute the verb telephoned. So that the multi-word verb is doing the same thing, but it sounds a good bit more informal. All right, so that is the end then of Chapter 2, and then we will move on to Chapter 3. But good luck on your quiz for Chapter 2 before you do that.